Okay, coming to the role. So it's an object that encapsulate set of access. Okay, set of access could be read, write, execute without permission, but it's encapsulate all the access. Okay, it's an object. It's kind of box. Inside the box, we have the actual access. That's a role. So role and entitlement is something we cannot talk a lot, but you should understand difference between role and entitlements from the Sailpoint perspective. Okay, other system would be having different terminology for entitlements, roles, because but we need to understand from the Sailpoint point of view what does it mean by role, what does it mean by entitlement. Okay, we'll come to it. Before that, so what it's doing, it will regulate and do the provisioning of the access to the resources based on the role on each user. Resources is nothing but application, right? So based on the role, user will select a role, and based on the role, user will get the actual access in the system. Okay, so let's give a example here. So this was the initial thing, right? The user was having access of Active Directory, he was having access of badge, he was having access of email. So these three access he was having. How we are controlling in Sailpoint? So user will just go ahead and raise a request for role, employee role, right? He will just raise one request. So under this request, automatically he will get access of email, AD, and badge, right? So how we're simplifying the thing, right? So this is the role-based access control. So based on the role, user is getting the access in AD, badge, and email. But here, user is directly getting the access, right? He need to raise three different requests if he want to access all these three things. But here, he's able to achieve with one request. He just requested for role. Based on this role, uh, as per the role configuration, user is getting the access of all the three things. Okay, that's the concept of role. So let's come to a little more scenario where we're going to understand how role is benefit in Sailpoint or any other item tool. Okay, so first thing, we have two kind of roles. One is a business role and second is the IT role in Sailpoint. That's a Sailpoint terminology, business and IT roles. Business role is something which is based on the business scenarios. Okay, so let's say we have 3 to 4 different kind of employees. One is like analyst, second is auditor, third is like lead, and some of them are managers, right? So based on their role, what roles they actually do perform in an organization, we can create business role. So business role is basically define the business perspective of it. So it is just a container which actually contains the IT roles. So business role is a super role, and in the business role we will see the IT roles always. So inside IT role we can't have the business role. Inside business roles only we can have the IT roles. So that's a hierarchy, top to bottom. Top is always business role, bottom is IT roles. And inside IT roles we generally do have the entitlements. So that's what you can see here, right? This complete hierarchy. So business role containing the IT role, inside IT role we have the entitlement. Entitlement is nothing but a actual access in the target system. Okay, so three terminology you should know, because I was talking about the three words, right? Earlier, business role, IT role, and entitlements. But in general, we talk about role and entitlement, these two things. Role is a terminology in Sailpoint, but entitlement is actual access in the target system. Okay. Inside role, we have two kind of role, business role, IT role. Business role contains the IT role, IT role contains the entitlement. Business role is defined based on the actual user purpose, what user does in the organization. And once we give that role, let's say one analyst is joining the organization. So now that analyst is something we want to give the analyst role, right? So as soon as you're going to give the analyst role to the user will get access of. So yeah, let's understand from this example. So as soon as we give analyst role to the user will get these two IT roles, treasury and the user. Okay, so now based on these roles, user will get user entitlements as well as treasury entitlements and finance entitlement. So we just gave one business role to the user, he got these three entitlement in the target system. Same way, now this thing is already configured, right? So now we got new requirement. So auditor also came to the system. So what we need to do now, we'll just create one business role. We'll give that business role to the user, and he will just point that business role to IT roles, and then entitlement is already there. So it's very easy, right? When someone joins, we don't need to create the complete hierarchy again for the different set of users. We just create one business role and it does support everything together. And the actual requirement and use cases comes like this scenario which you see here. We have this user IT role already created, treasury IT role already created. Now we want to give some set of users only this IT role and their entitlements, but for some different roles, we want to give both together and their entitlements. So business roles will helping us here. So in one of the, we'll create one new business role. That business role would be having only this IT role. Okay. So now we are able to solve the purpose. So if you want to just give this IT role and entitlement, we'll just give this business role to the user. And if you want to give both, then we'll give this business role. Okay, so that's how we can make it as complex as we want. So any number of IT roles we can create, any number of business role, any number of entitlements can be possible inside the IT role. But in the end, we don't need to work on like thousands of entitlements altogether. When we are talking about access to the user, we'll talk about just some 20-30 business roles, and those 20-30 business roles are comprising of all the 1,000-2,000 entitlements. Okay, so that's the main concept of roles in Sailpoint. That's how we use it.
A question
Okay.
here, Vinay.
Yep.
The
Go ahead.
entitlement will be in one IT role. It will not be in multiple IT roles, right?
Entitlement can be in multiple IT role as well. Let's say treasury entitlement. It can be present here and it can be present here as well. That's not a problem.
No, but
Reason being, yeah.
go ahead, go ahead.
So reason being, we want to give treasury entitlement along with user entitlement for some users, right? So in that case, we'll create one more IT role. That IT role would be having treasury entitlement and user entitlement here. Okay,
Okay.
third
Yeah.
third part, and that
But
we
that
can
will be
tag to one
different.
business. Go
But
ahead.
that will be different than these two.
Yeah, it will be different than these two.
Yeah.
Right.
So technically, IT role is just a one its own.
Coming in.
No, no. I'm saying like so in a sense they are different. So um there's no duplicate entitlement, right?
Yeah, there's no duplicate entitlement, right?
Hmm.
Right.
Okay.
That's correct. And SailPoint also does take care of that as well. So let's say a real-time example. We have two different IT roles, and these two IT roles, it's not like we can just give business role to the user. We can also give directly IT role to the user, and we can also give directly entitlement to the user. SailPoint does provide that functionality. So I'll show you that here. So when I'm talking about this page, right, firstly we are selecting the user. Once we click on next, so here when we are saying searching access, right, so whatever business role, IT role, or entitlement, it will show all three here, right? So we can select anything. That's not a problem. But generally we do select business roles because that's make more sense and it's very easy to search. And the example which I was telling you is like if we have multiple IT roles, sorry, if we are selecting the IT role which does have duplicate entitlements, like this is also having the treasury entitlement and this one also do the treasury entitlement. So what it will does, it will just give based on the first one. So it would be having some sequence, right? The way it will do the provisioning target system, it will do provision this, and when it will see that treasury entitlement is also there here, and it will just throw error, it's a duplicate value. So it will not harm anything because target system can't hold multiple same thing, right? It's a single access to the user. So that's not a problem actually. But generally that's a job of analytics here. So we can do the mining as well. Role mining is also one concept can be done, but how we do this in an organization, the role complete structure, this is a business requirement. So they do assign some analyst who actually gather the requirement, and then they come ahead with some kind of requirement, how their entitlement look like for one application, what kind of IT role they want to create, and what kind of business role they want to create. So that's a altogether business requirement, and it takes time to create this hierarchy. And then after that has been taken care, the complete requirement, then we onboard the requirement to the Sailpoint system. Okay, any questions? I know it's very like vast area, and you might be having multiple questions because we are talking about complex scenario. But yeah, feel free to ask questions. I'm ready to answer. Okay, so let's move to the next one. So here, what extra we have? Okay, so here we are talking about assigned assigned role and detection role. We'll talk about this maybe next slide. I think it's here. Okay, it's permitted and requested. Yeah, it's here. So yeah, we'll talk about here. Okay, so it's saying automatically assigned, requested, and defined group of entitlement detected in the identities. Okay, so just duplicate screenshot. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so this one is a required and permitted relationship. So here, if you see required and permitted, this is a relationship between business role and IT role. So whenever we define some required role inside the business role, so that's a mandatory user will get that IT role. Okay, so let's say we have given one business role to the user. Based on the business role, user will get this IT role for sure. Okay, because it's a required role. But if the role is permitted, so it means user can get this role, but he had to request separately for that. I mean, like while the approval part, manager will get the option, like because this business role is giving this role by default, and this one is something he is giving option. So while approving time, manager will see like, should I give this role also to the user or not? So that's the option during the approval manager will get. Okay, so that's a concept of permitted roles. So it's user will not get by default, but as a part of access request he will get if he
So,
wanted or not. Yeah,
where do we set the permitted role?
this thing, right? Yeah, I'll show
Yeah.
you that
Okay.
when I'm going to create one business role in IT role. I'll show you that. Okay, so rest role is same. So I hope you understood different between required and permitted role, because this is also very most commonly question asked in interviews. So they do ask what is the required role, what is the permitted role. It's a relationship between business and IT roles, which user will get by default based on the business role. That's the required role, and the option for the role which IT role user will get based on the business role. That's a permitted role.
Is there anything like blocked role? For example,
Sorry.
we don't. Uh, is there anything that, let's say, we call it a blocked role or not permitted role? So this role will not go, for example, to a contractor business role. Is
Mhm.
there anything like this, like to prevent
Uh,
totally?
So that thing is something either we can do it requestable, non-requestable on the system level. We can make it as a requestable or non-requestable.
Mhm.
And second option is like automation. So we can make the automation also like based on the user joining the organization. We can directly give business role to the user based on the like if user is employee only then he will get this role, if user is a contractor only then he will get this role, if user is an auditor only then he will get this role automatically, no need to do that thing, right? So there are two ways we can achieve this thing. Okay, just give me 1 second. Okay, so that's the thing. Now assign and detected role, this is also very important. Like concept is same whatever we had talked about the business and IT role, but in interview or something people do ask this term because this is a little confusing for the new people who are just joined Sailpoint and they don't get familiar with these terms. So that's why interviewer generally prefer to ask questions about assigned and detected roles. Okay, so assigned is nothing but a business role, detected is nothing but a IT role. Okay, so make it as simple as that. Assigned is business role, detected is IT roles. So why we do say assigned is a business role and detective is IT role, because generally what we do whenever we do grant a role to the user, we always prefer to give business role to the user. So it means it is assigned. So we are assigning business role to the user. Okay. So whatever we are assigning to the user, that's a business role. Based on the business role, IT role is getting detected, right? So that's why we call it as a detected role. So just make your concept very clear. Only to cram or do something here. We are assigning business role. That's why it's a assigned role. Based on the business role, IT role is getting detected. That's why detected role. Okay.
Yeah, as you told, these terms are confusing. Can you give any live examples? Like if you take an organization, there are multiple teams and different platforms.
Sorry, Nusha, again, your voice is very low. People.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, if you talk about, can you give any live example for this? Like if you take any organization, there are multiple platform, like multiple teams, various teams in a project, or such live example.
Yeah, so yeah, I'll show you that. Just after this slide, I'll show you that how to create business role and IT roles, and you will see how we can do the complete thing. Okay.
Sure.
Okay, maybe we'll come to this later. Firstly, let me show you this thing only roles. Then we'll talk about this refresh task. Okay, we need to come from setup to roles. So that's the place we need to come here. So this is the role area, okay, where we do actually create the roles, and the existing role also we're gonna see here itself. Okay, so role viewer is the main tab where we're gonna see all the roles. So what we'll do here, we'll come here, we'll do the new role creation. We'll come to roles. So under roles, we can create any role. So here is the one where we do actually select the type. Okay. Organization is nothing but a kind of container which actually contain the business role, but we rarely do use because organization is something one for one organization. So inside that we create business role. So business and IT role are the main concept of roles. So we are selecting business as a type for this one, and we can give any description. And now this is not required. We can make it disabled, but that's we don't want. Assignment rule I'll talk about. Okay, let me talk right away. So assignment rule is basically criteria based on which this business role will be given to the user. Okay, so we have two options. Either we can put some assignment rule for this, or we don't need to put any assignment rule. I'll tell you, like I was telling you, right? So if you want to give this business role automatically to the users, then we can write a assignment rule. But if we want to select this business role based on the user access request, right? So then we don't need to give the assignment rule. So if we just give here assignment rule where we are saying based on the match list, right? So add identity attribute. So what we are saying based on the identity attribute, if type like employee type is equal to contractor or employee, if employee type is equal to this, then it will give this role to the user. Okay, and this is the one which you were asking, right? Required role and permitted roles. So if we just select here, modify the required role, it will select whatever the IT role we want to select, but we don't have any IT role here. So we can come back here and we can select also, that's not a problem. And we can select permitted role also. Okay, inherited role is something when one IT role, we can have multiple business and IT role as well. So inside one IT role, we want to select one more IT role, right? Inside one business role, we can select one more business role. So hierarchy is something we can produce based on our complexity. Okay, so now we're gonna do the submit here. So now our business role is ready. So this business role will always look like this way. This symbol is there for business role. And same way, let's create one IT role as well. So we'll select IT from here. And then this is not required. And you see, right, in IT role, you can't see that assignment rule. So that's the important thing. Assignment rule is always present only in the business role because that's an assigned role, right? So, and that's the only role which we can give default based on the user attribute. But IT role is something is only applicable when we want to directly select from the access request. So I was telling you, right, inside business role there's IT role, inside IT role there's an entitlement, which is the target user access. So here you see I have option to select entitlements. What entitlement I want to select for the target user, target application. Inside business role I was having access of choose required role. Required role is nothing but an IT role, or permitted role, which is so required and permitted role are the type of IT role. Okay, and inside IT role I can select entitlements. So I'm not selecting any entitlement because I don't have any, but you can select it from here. I'll show you entitlement where exactly it is present and how we can select it from here. So I'll submit this now. Now our one IT role and one business role is ready, right? But now there is no connection between these two. IT role will always gonna look like this way, this kind of box, but business role always going to look like this way. Okay. Now, but there's no relation, right? If I click on this business role, you can just see there's some detail, but assignment rule is this one, but there's no required role inside this one, right? So we want to create that kind of relationship between these two as a required role. I'll just go ahead and do the edit of this business role. And now I'll come to this required role section. Okay, I need to select that IT. So this is coming here, right? IT role 1. So now IT role 1, I select this and save. Okay, you can see ID role is present here. I'll just submit. Okay, so now business role definition, you can see now ID role should be present. Answer under required role, you can see this ID role is there. Okay, and this is the ID role as soon as I clicked on that role. Inside IT role, we always have entitlements, but we don't have any entitlement right now. We can't select because there's we can select application, but inside this application there is no entitlement right now. So I'll tell you about the entitlement as well, so you will understand where exactly we have the entitlements. Okay, how does the entitlement works actually? There's an entitlement catalog here. Okay, so this entitlement catalog to have all the different application access. Okay, this is also important area. Like let's say we have two target different system. One is a Unix system and second is the Active Directory. So Active Directory do also have 20 different kind of entitlements or different accesses, and Unix also do have 5 to 6 different kind of access in the system. So all those things will be present here. Okay, 20 access of Active Directory as well as 6 access of Unix. Okay, because that's how you can see application and attribute, right? These are different access attribute and their display name, that's the attribute. So 20 plus 6, you will gonna see 26. And how
So,
that is coming here? Yeah, go ahead here.
so these entitlements will appear in this catalog after the discovery phase. So after creating the connector, let's say in the example that you're giving between Sailpoint and Active Directory and between Sailpoint and Unix. So it will populate automatically once we create this connector. So those
So yeah,
entitlements, I'll see them in this catalog. Is this how it works?
that's a good question, yeah. So basically, firstly, we're gonna create the connector. We'll come here and we'll onboard application like we did for HR, right? So same way, we're gonna just go ahead and create a application for Active Directory connector. Once everything is all set, we need to for population of this entitlement catalog, all the access, we need to come here under task. Okay, under task, new task, then account a group aggregation. Okay, so this kind of task we need to create. It's basically to gather all the groups from the target system, all the entitlements. So for each and every application we do configure this task. So we just need to, after configuration of that application, we'll select that application here. Okay, so we'll give just name to this one, and then we'll select that application because we don't have any application right now. So that's why it's not doing that. It's not group based application. So once we do select this one and we save and execute, it will populate all the different access in the target system at this location at here. Okay, so that's how we'll get the target access in our system in
Okay.
Sailpoint.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, so now we know this was all about entitlements. So we learned about business role, IT role, and entitlements, all three things, right? We have seen how business role and IT roles are interlinked to each other. Once the entitlements are populated here, you're gonna see the option exactly here. Once IT role, I click on that edit, right? So add, right? Once I click on add, I'm gonna see all the things here. Once I select this one, okay, I'm gonna see all the entitlements. Okay, any question at this point of time? And now I'll show you this thing as well, how we're gonna see this thing, manage user access. So that's the way. Okay, there are two. Before I come here, I'll just tell one more thing. We'll see whether user will get the business role or not. Maybe there could be some challenge, but let's explore that also. So now we have two options. Okay, firstly, let's cover this manage user access itself, then we'll come to the next one.
One question before you go to the
Yep.
manager user
Mhm.
access regarding entitlements in applications where we don't have connectors.
Mhm.
Is there a way like to upload some kind of CSV file and get to those entitlements within Sailpoint?
Yes, yeah, it is there. So for that, we need to just configure, like, we just need to create one application of type this CSV base, like the one we have created, delimited file, right? So
Yeah.
delimited file we're gonna create here, and once this file is there, then we just gonna do the account group aggregation for that one. So that's how it's feasible, and we do it. It's very regular use case, which we generally do it to get the like access from the target system, which doesn't support Sailpoint in a regular connector way.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, so coming to that thing, there are two ways, right? We can do the access for business and IT roles. So one is the user access. Once we come here, because as of now there's no application, actual application target system, right? So we'll just give this thing. We'll just try to give Brian one access. Once I click here, I gonna see all the access, right? Business role and test B role. It is not showing ID role. I think ID role is not enabled right now, but we can enable that as well to make sure that is also requestable. By default, it's not requestable. So once I click on this business role one, next, and then review and submit, right? So once I do submit this request, it's saying processing request. So that's how end user will request for this business role. And based on the business role, user is going to get the actual access in the target system. Okay. So now it's saying this request has been submitted. In an ideal scenario, this request go for approval, but here the approval is not configured. So that's why it is, maybe it's completed. We'll check it out. We'll come to my work under access request. We're gonna see this request. This is here, right? And it's saying it's completed. So we'll come here and click on details. So it's talking about the same request, everything, when this was started, when it was completed, verification date, all the steps. It's saying what was the things was requested, right? It was requested for a business role one, and that's how it was taken care. Okay, so now this was a business role which is given to the user, but in actual scenario when there's an entitlement corresponding to the IT role, it will do the actual provisioning in the target system, and then we're gonna see the provisioning is done on the user. So if I'll come to the Brian, this guy, so I'll show you user would be having this one. I think this was a user, right? Yeah. So now this user, you see here, right? Under entitlement section, you can see user do have this role now. Okay. And if based on the roles, if user is going to get the entitlement target system, you're going to see all the entitlement here as well for the user. And if you want to track, let's say this, for this user, we have raised 10 to 20 different access requests. And if you want to track what other different access requests has been raised for the user, we can come to the event section. Under event, we can see this request was raised for this user, access request 3, right? So that's how in general use cases or general business scenario, we're going to see too many requests are being raised for different kind of accesses. And to troubleshoot the issue, we generally come here and we do see whether it got failed, whether it's got completed, or how does it look like for each and every scenario. Okay, so that's how it is going to look like. And second thing is, second option we have, one is user access request. Any question on that before I go to the next one? Okay, I'll just explain from here first, and then I'll go to the actual hands-on. So second option is basically how we can do the automation of this thing. So that is basically done by the refresh cube task, because you remember we have given that assignment rule over there, right? If user type is equal to employee, then it should give that business role to the user. So that is being taken care by this refresh assign detected role. There's an option in refresh tasks. This is the one, refresh assign detected and promote additional entitlement. What it will do based on the assignment rule, so whatever assignment rule we have given, it will just check each and every user. While checking the user, if it found like it is satisfying the criteria as per the assignment rule, it will give that business role to the user. Okay, so that's the one automation it is doing. So this is the generic scenario when some new joiners are coming in with either contractor employees, or it could be based on their role type or job title, right? It could be any field. It's not limited to anything. And even we can write our own code as well. It's not limited to even attributes. Whatever we want to achieve, we can do it from the assignment rule. And next thing is like uh, now one is a joiner, and second could be the attribute change as well. Whenever anyone is changing their like location, they want to move from America to UK, right? So based on that also we want to give different business role. So that's the other scenario. If somebody is changing the role, right? Earlier the job title was lead, but now he's becoming a manager. So now we want lead related role, business role or entitlement should go away from the user profile, and now manager related roles and target entitlement user should get. So all those things can be automated with the help of this assignment rule. So now this is the option. As soon as the user will change their profile, so this task is keep on running after every 1 day, or sometime we can configure it every 4 hours, 2 hours, right? It's based on the business requirement. So once we do trigger the refresh task when this option is enabled, then it will just do the refresh of each user, and then he gonna detect the gonna assign the business role based on the IT role, automatically get detection. Okay. Provision assignment is basically the other option. Although they could have made both the options together as a single option, where it will do firstly it will give the business role. Based on the business role, it will give the target entitlement in the target system basically. But the actual provisioning in the target system is taken care by this. Okay. So let's say if we have selected only this option but not this one, right? What it will do, it will just give the business role to the user, but it will not do the actual access grant in the target system. Only after enabling of this option, we're gonna see the actual grant of the access to the target system for that particular user. Okay, so I think it's talking about the same thing here. So from the HR application, the new title came for this user, and user is getting this business role, and business role after business role, we have like ran this refresh task. When the refresh task is ran, it will give basically, no, actually based on the refresh task, it will give the business role, and then it will give the actual access to the target user. Okay, so that's how this flow works. I'll show you this thing. So the refresh task. Okay, so here we'll select this option. Okay, and we're gonna run this one task. We'll see if this is going to give the business role to the users. Our task is running. We'll come to task result and we'll see refresh cube 950. This is the task. So once I click on this, it's saying it has examined 41 identities. Sorry, 21. So let's see if the user got this business role or not. I think user didn't get. Maybe there's some problem. The type is not populated, is it? Or maybe we didn't populate type last time. I think we didn't populate type last time for any of the user. I'm not sure. Was that there in CSV file or not? But yeah, uh, type if it's a contractor or employee. Okay, so based on that, it will just give the business role here. Okay, so if we could have the type here, so we could have seen that, but we can try for one other thing also based on our existing data, what we can do. So if like Donald, right? So what we can say, if user first name is Donald, right? Only then it gonna give the business role to the user. Okay, so let's try that option based on our data which we have. So I'll just modify existing rule again. Edit role. Okay, submit. I'm just verifying. Yeah, it's Donald, right? So now this role should be given to the user whose name is Donald as first name. So again, coming back to the task, now I need to come and run this task again. So this option is selected. So I can just execute and let's see. It is here. Okay, now we see this role is there, right? Business role. So now this user got the business role, but this wasn't having this one. Uh, this user was not having this business role earlier, right? So it's saying assigned, right? So this is assigned role. And if you see, right, there's a no like no access request, right? There's no access request. So there are two options. One, we can raise based on the access request. Based on the access request, user can get the business role. Second, based on assignment rule, also user can get the business role. These are the two options. One automatic and second the manual approach. Okay, any questions on this? Okay, I'll just talk about the birthright role as well. So basically, birthright role is limited as compared to business role. So birthright role is a new concept which came. It wasn't there earlier. Earlier only IT role and business role we were talking. But birthright role is a special case where only for the new joiner, right? Whenever new joiner is joining the organization, so we make sure we just create one business role, and based on the business role, user will get these many different kind of access. Okay, so in that case, what is happening? We don't need to decide the assignment rule as well. It's like we are saying as soon as user will join, so we want to give this to every user, right? So it's a special case of business role. In business role, we can decide we want to give these many access to these contractors or employee when user is moving from one department to the department, user is moving from location, user is moving from job title. Okay, so that's a very wide statement for business role. But birthright role is very special case of business role where for each and every user we want to make sure as soon as somebody will join, we want to make sure user will get the AD account, user will get the email account. So that's a birthright rule. So that's why it will only trigger during the joiner event only. That's not requestable. This birthright rule is, as we know, it's a birthright, right? So it's an automatic way of giving the access. So it's not request based. And single tier model, right? So it's not related to any IT roles. Like business role do have IT role, inside IT role we have entitlement, but in birthright role it directly work with the entitlements only. It's a single tier, it's not a two tier. Okay, so this is also important where we do compare the difference between birthright and business role. So like we said, birthright role is based on the baseline access, like basic access we want to give. But business role is something can be access from the access request also. Second is like is joiner event only event, but it can be triggered from the identity refresh task, as well as it can be taken care by all the different change in the attribute. Okay, it's non-requestable, but there's a requestable, and is single tier and it's a two tier. It does have IT role, inside it will be the entitlements. Okay, so that is all about the role.